Greetings. Welcome, everybody, to the first day of winter again. Oh, yes. It seems to happen every year, doesn't it? Yeah, it's what it means to be winter, I suppose, depends on where you live. That's for sure. Having lived in a lot of different areas, winter has meant a lot of different things to me. That's for sure. So, yeah, since winter is so important to, climate on the planet and growing seasons and everything else, I figure it'd be a pretty good idea. Let's talk about winter here, since it's coming at us. Yeah. Well, what it means, is that for the northern hemisphere, we got a certain amount of wobble or tip to the Earth's axis, and at this point, we are tipped away from the sun. Sun's out here, and the Earth tips and goes away from the sun, so that the southern hemisphere is pointed more directly towards the sun at this time of the year. And the northern hemisphere is lean back a ways. Now, actually, as far as our orbit is concerned, we're actually closer to the sun in the wintertime than we are in the summertime. Well, as I said, I've lived in different areas of this country, and so in the north, winter definitely meant snow. It meant cold weather. It also meant winter sports. In Chicago, hockey was a big deal, man, with the Blackhawks. And not that they played outside, but it just happens to be one of those winter sports. They put away the baseball bats and pick up the hockey sticks. In conversation with my brother, the two of us are fairly close in age, and we grew up together. Both of us seem to recall that when we were boys during the 1950s, in the very early 60s in Chicago, that we more consistently had cold weather and snow. It doesn't seem to be that way anymore. Winters become very erratic. It's just bouncing back and forth. We used to have long periods of time where we would ice skate, when the water was frozen. We had long periods where we would sled and toboggan when we were boys in Chicago and throw snowballs around. And neither of us figure it as an illusion of our memories. Winter used to be a little bit more consistent when it came. Snow would last a little longer than it seems to lately. Later, I moved to northern Wisconsin and up close to Lake Superior up there. Well, you get 6 months worth of winter, that's for sure, no matter what, and they probably will continue to. It snows, and the snow tends to stay, and so that meant, we did cross-country skiing. It meant I'd shovel off the Bass Pond and go on out and, put a pump in and flood it so we had a nice ice skating surface. Had big hills. We used to run the toboggans and sleds down, It meant I'd probably go do some winter hunting on snowshoes, stuff like that. Go ice fishing. These were all positive things that have to do with winter. Fond memories, putting the truck out on a frozen lake and cutting donuts. That's all the fun stuff. But then there was having to go to work every day. Winter, I think, is a lot more fun in the north when you're a child than it is. Although I used to have to either walk through the snow or ride my bicycle to school, I guess. Although they wouldn't fire you if you were late. But, you know how it's... Yeah, I used to have to walk through 6 foot of snow, butt naked, no shoes on, uphill both ways at 40 below to get to school when I was a boy. Yeah, right. Yeah, but no, getting to work, man. Wintertime and getting to work, that ain't any fun. That's no fun at all. It'd be... Where I lived in North Woods, sometimes I'd get out on the road to go to work, and I'd be the first person out on the highway, period, after a blizzard, and so I'd be drift busting. I used to put my cross-country skis into the back of the truck, and depending when I, as we called it in Wisconsin, rhubarbed the truck. In other words, put the truck out into the woods. because of the snow. Then it depends on whether I was closer to home or closer to work as to which way I'd start skiing. That was a common occurrence. Anyhow, as far as gardeners and farmers are concerned, generally speaking, most people in the U.S., the wintertime is pretty much an end to the crops, and the tomatoes are going to come out of a jar that it's in the basement, for a while. It's also a time, though, to assess what were the problems we had, what are the potential solutions. Do I want to continue trying to do that again? It's a great time for review, But then it's also a marvelous time to be looking over what seeds and plants might be on the agenda for next year's garden. So the seed catalogs will be pouring in pretty soon. And even with this silly pandemic, I imagine there'll still be a seed business. Things aren't as good as they were. I've had trouble getting some seeds during this that I'm used to getting. We'll see how things are doing over here at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. I'll be making a seed order out to those guys here real quick for beans and corn and a bunch of things. Yeah. But so what does winter mean here in Hawaii to me at 1,600 feet in Mountain View? Well, it means I'm wearing a sweatshirt. Yep. Down at the shore, it's probably a bit warmer. They're probably not wearing sweatshirts today. But up here, it's been cloudy and rainy, and so I've been wearing my sweatshirt all morning long. I pretty much wear one up here all winter long. So, not all parts of Hawaii are palm trees and, in bikinis. Same, even with Florida, I'm sure right now they're putting on the fur-lined bikinis, right? People up in Maine are definitely making sure they got their earmuffs and so on. So there's going to be a lot of variation depending on where you're sitting on this planet. Here I switch my crops mostly from, growing tomatoes and growing, I could still do corn, but tomatoes and peppers, I don't sow any of that at this time of the year. Peppers, some of them are wintering over. Eggplants, some wintering over, but they're not doing a lot. They like more heat, and so my focus is on things like peas, on onions, leeks, cabbage, broccoli. I just planted more lettuce and more broccoli this morning. So we change what we do even up here in Hawaii at this time of the year. The difference between the day lengths from June to July to December here is fairly minimal. If you're a person who has the seasonally affected disorders where you get gloomy when it gets dark, well, living closer to the equator probably solves the problem because we don't get as much variation in time over here. I notice I haven't been as affected with the blues in the winter here in Hawaii as I used to be when I lived in northern Wisconsin. Yeah, there the day lengths swing wild. That's a crazy difference. Not as bad as Alaska, but yes, I recall when I lived in northern Wisconsin, and when I lived in Illinois too, that during the summers we would intensively grow things and then harvest, process, freeze, can, dry, whatever, putting food up for the winter, figuring out how to store it, because there might be months and months where you couldn't really grow anything. So after moving from Wisconsin to California, I know while living in the Bay Area, initially I still had a hangover from living in the upper Midwest. The anxiety as to whether my firewood pile is high enough used to still hit me. I hardly had to scrape my windshield even in that climate. Every once in a while we get a frost, but I still take the old pressure canner and canning tomatoes, and putting up all this food. And well, one day I kind of looked at it all and I went, California's got two growing seasons. One's cool, one's warm, but nothing stops here. It's always going on. And so if I change my eating habits so that I'm eating more cabbages and broccoli and peas and stuff during the winter months, and citrus would be ripe during the winter there in California, and then ate my melons and corn and tomatoes and chilies during the summer months, then I really didn't have to put up much food. There was no real need for it, so the only time I'd put things up is when I had way too much, and they had to figure out some way to try to store it, like the persimmons. Persimmons are always an overload, and so it was a real savior when we started drying them, and they're really good dried too, so it's a product to itself. It's like we dry pineapple here for the same reason. We become overwhelmed with it. And drying it, we'll put it up and store it so we can have it for months and months and months. And dried white pineapple, again, is a thing to itself. It's not the same, as the fresh pineapple. So we do storage and processing to some extent here. I always have too much sweet corn, and so I'm always freezing extra sweet corn. I think I just ate the last container there towards Thanksgiving. Thinking about putting in the next crop of corn. I could have one right now if I wanted it. We can grow it year round here, but try to keep space between my corn crops because corn is one of the least healthy foods that I grow. It's a good carb, blah, 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 but it, as far as the vegetable goes, it's pretty fattening. Yeah, so here in Hawaii, situation's pretty much the same. That we have, there's a cool and a warm season. It's not as extreme as California. It doesn't get as hot and it doesn't get as cold and it definitely doesn't get as dry. And so we don't see as much variation, but I still switch my crop mix here too. But it goes on. All winter means here is that I'm planting more broccoli and less tomatoes. That's pretty much it. Just like in California, it's when most of my citrus comes on. We're picking some real quality citrus right now. So that's what one thing winter means here is citrus season. But so this whole winter thing, has tremendous variations depending on where on the planet you're at. If you're in Sydney, Australia, well, this is pretty much high summer, I guess, as far as weather conditions are concerned. So nothing's even, nothing's the same for anybody in this. We all got our own attitudes towards it. I know I used to convince myself that I liked winter. Yes, I used to tell myself that until I got away from it long enough to realize, well, you live with something, you got to get used to it. Yeah, but undoing what it took for me to get used to winter was where I realized it probably wasn't the best thing in the world for me anyway. It creates a lot of stress. It really can. That's one reason Hawaii has people who live a long time. We get outside around here. The air is pretty good, so on and so forth. But I think the lack of stress on the islands is one reason people tend to live long. Weather stresses old people. I see old couples here in Hilo helping each other down the sidewalk. And if they were in Duluth, Minnesota, they'd have been dead for 20 years already, because the wind would have just swept them away. So anyway, there's my thoughts and comments on winter. Anybody's got anything to say about what winter means to them, hey, bring it on, Yeah, y'all hang loose.